At InDigital, we know that public safety professionals hold themselves to a high standard. In fact, standard doesn't do it justice. In over 25 years working alongside you, carrying millions of calls over our IP networks, your dedication has inspired us. That's why our ESI Net goes beyond industry standards, not only i3 compliant, but designed to adapt to future development for a network you can count on when it matters most. Learn more at indigital.net.
If Within the Trenches has ever taught you something, open your eyes to what it is like to be a 911 dispatcher, or has inspired you to become one, then help support us and join our Patreon. Get exclusive bonus content, one-of-a-kind swag, discounts on merchandise, ad-free early access to new episodes, and much more. To join, please visit patreon.com/WTT podcast. And if you're an industry partner, we have something for you as well. And now, for the show.
This is Jordan, and you're listening to the Code 7 Podcast Network.
Warning. This episode contains the 3 A's of podcasting: adult content, adult language, and awesomeness. You've been warned.
Welcome to Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them.
Hey, what's going on? This is Ricardo with the Code 7 Podcast Network, and this is going to be episode 566 of Within the Trenches, True Stories from the 911 Dispatchers Who Live Them. This episode is sponsored by InDigital, a leader in next-gen core services, and a big shout-out, as always, to all subscribers of the podcast. Thank you so very much, but especially all of you who are watching, listening, supporting, and sharing. Because, as I always say, and it's true every single time, I wouldn't be able to do everything I do if it wasn't for all of you and your support, so thank you so much. I am fresh back from 3 of 4 classes that I did out in Raleigh, North Carolina. Also, a big shout out goes to everyone who has been impacted by the most recent hurricane that went through, especially the folks out there in North Carolina and in Tennessee. I can't even imagine what all of you are going through, and to all of the TERT teams that are going out there to assist. Travel safe, and I have the utmost respect for all of you. Thank you for everything that you all do. Now, as I mentioned, I am fresh back from North Carolina, and this episode is actually going to be an Imagine Listening episode. Now, I mentioned a few episodes ago that I have about 20 Imagine Listening sessions. So Imagine Listening as well as open mic back to back. I do have other episodes with folks interview style as well, and those are going to be coming up, but I wanted to get these Imagine Listening sessions out there, and I have tons of stories that were written and shared during Imagine Listening at the sessions, the 8-hour course, the communications course that I do out there when I was out in North Carolina. Now, I do have one class left that's going to be coming up on October 8th, and I look forward to seeing all of you out there. And it's just been a lot of fun with you, but very eye-opening for everyone as we come together through the power of storytelling to heal and find some form of closure through sharing stories with each other. And this one was done out in Johnston County, and this was back in April of this year, so April 2024. This was done out there, so there will be live audio from those who are in attendance, and then there will be stories that are read by myself that a lot of folks had written down and submitted during the course. So without further ado, here is Imagine Listening session for Within the Trenches podcast, episode 566. Imagine watching your son take off on his four-wheeler. You've witnessed this many times. He rides, he has fun, and all is well. Now imagine you're 911, taking a call from frantic parents who have just found their son underneath his flipped four-wheeler. You listen to the parents as they scream while they remove it off his body. You tell them that help is on the way, and you give them CPR instructions. An officer arrives, and you listen as he performs CPR. "Come on, buddy. Come on," is what you hear over the phone. This is what it is like within the trenches of 911. In this episode, you'll hear stories from the I Am 911 movement, a movement I started to fight for the reclassification of dispatchers from clerical to protective and bring awareness to the types of calls that 911 dispatchers answer on a daily basis. This is an Imagine Listening session. Now, you heard the warning at the beginning, but I must warn you again and add that if you suffer from PTSD or have suicidal tendencies, you are listening at your own risk. The stories you are about to hear are all true and come from the dispatchers who lived them. While some stories have a good outcome, the majority are horrifying. This is our reality. Your worst day is our everyday. So let's start with a bang. I want you to imagine each story. Become the dispatcher who has taken each call and imagine listening. So that first story started like this. That first story. This started the whole I Am 911 movement. I heard your last breath the night you flipped your four-wheeler. Hashtag I Am 911. There's more to that, of course. I put it out there, as I mentioned. A couple days later, during this time, there was a show on Netflix that I was binge watching. It was called Stranger Things. I like that you chuckled, so you were watching too. A lot of people know about this show, right? Probably thinking, what does this matter? Well, here we go. There's a scene, spoiler alert. It's been a long time since the first season, but spoiler alert. There's a scene there where the sheriff finds one of the kids who's been missing pretty much throughout the entire season. And when he finds him, he's laying on his back, unconscious, possibly not breathing. And he starts doing CPR. And as he's doing CPR, he says, "Come on, buddy, come on," or something to that effect. And I lost it. I was crying, and crying hard. But I couldn't figure out why at the time that I was crying. Yeah, it was a dramatic scene, right? But it's just a show. Afterwards, I went outside. And then it hit me. It was a trigger. Because that night that I took that call, I'm listening to the parents give CPR to their kid who didn't make it. There was an officer who got on scene before EMS, and when he keys up on the radio to say he's on scene, I can hear him running. And I told them, there's an officer there, he's gonna help you with CPR. But I couldn't hang up. Why? Because I wanted to hear that kid wake up or something. I wanted to hear something. And I hear the officer through the phone. "I've got this." Jumps in, he's doing CPR now. And he says, "Come on, buddy, come on." And that was it, because now I was watching it in the show. I was watching it play out right in front of me. What happens in 911? Technology is different now. Some places you can see it, right? But a lot of times, everything we hear, we're piecing together as a puzzle to put it out there so that the responders know what is going on, and sometimes what we are picturing is worse than what it is. But now I was seeing it in this TV show. And it was a trigger. But that's also why I share the story. Some of these stories might be a little hard, but it's okay to share. We're all right. You're in a safe place. So who has a story that they would like to share?
So it was Thanksgiving, because, we all work holidays, and it was probably 2 a.m. Got a call, teenager, she's throwing up, she's sick. And I was like, okay, food poisoning, whatever. And something just didn't sit right, and she was upset And I was like, well, is your family home? What's going on? Are you home alone? No. Does your family know you're sick? No. And it still didn't sit right. And I finally asked her, I was like, what's going on? Have you taken something? And she's like, yeah, she had overdosed. She was trying to kill herself. And, I started talking to her, and she had a house full of family, and she felt so alone. She had a holiday, normal holiday, just, was a teenager, was going through a rough time, and she started freaking out that her parents were going to be so upset, and her parents were going to be so mad, and I was like, well, listen, you're going to have a police officer show up at your door. I don't want your parents to be upset. Can we go let somebody know what's going on? I will stay on the phone with you, whether it's mom, dad, brother, sister. Somebody's gonna, answer the door when a cop starts knocking at 2 o'clock in the morning. Let's let somebody know what's going on. And she just starts crying and screaming, and that she was just so upset that her parents were gonna be disappointed and they were gonna be mad at her because now the cops are coming to her house. And I'm like, the cops aren't coming because you're in trouble. You're not in trouble. They're coming so that you're safe, so that everyone is safe, and to help you get help. And I don't know whatever happened to her, and we hang up the phone, and I don't think that she died that night. I mean, she was lucid. She was starting to get really lethargic by the end of the call. But I think of every Thanksgiving, I think of her. And it was one of those that, like, that night, it didn't hit me that hard, but I've worked a lot of Thanksgiving since then, and every single Thanksgiving, a lot of holidays, I think about her and wonder, if she ever made it to college, if she ever tried again, if she's still here, and what she thinks about after that night.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. There's a lot of calls like these, as you said, a lot of times with these calls, you feel connected with these folks that are calling in. And I'll say this right now, because there's a story that I will share later on in the afternoon. But I'm a firm believer that maybe sometimes some of these calls are meant for us. The reason I say that is because maybe there's something in our background, our history growing up that allows us to connect with that caller and help them better than our partners could do. Not that they wouldn't do a good job, they would probably do an amazing job, but they don't have that same experience. And actually, I'll share a story with you here in a little bit talking about that.
All right. Okay. So I'll tell you guys how I got into 911. February 19, 2011, I was in a very bad car accident with an 18-wheeler. I remember having my phone tucked between my thighs, and I called 911. And I'm 21 years old, I'm freaking out, I'm like hysterical. And I remember on the phone, I'm like, that dispatcher asked me, said, where are you at? So I'm like, okay. I was driving from Edenton to Plymouth. That's all I knew. This is maybe a 30-minute apart drive. So the dispatcher's like, I don't know where you are. And mind you, it was like 6 o'clock in the morning. I had no idea. The only thing I remember was seeing white smoke and trees. That's all I could see. So the truck driver came, I passed my phone, and he ended up telling the dispatcher where we were, thank God. So I say that because when I got into dispatch, it was a year after I had recovered from my accident. My mom said, the communications department is hiring, you should go apply. So I'm like, okay, communications. I'm thinking I'll be like the front office at the sheriff's office, or, just communications. So I applied. It's a small town, so we didn't have an interview. And then they take me on what I'm looking for, the word? A tour. Yeah, a tour. So they take me to the tour of the center. So as we get to the door, said, welcome to the 911 center. I said, 911? What? She was like, yeah, 911 communications. So I had no idea what I was signing up for. But it's something that registered with me when I started. I remember how I felt when I was on that phone and somebody told me, I did not know where you are. I cannot help you because I don't know where you are. And I vowed to, I would never, Lord, please never have one of my callers feel that way when I'm on the phone with them. So that's how I got into the 911. Completely unexpected, but that's been since 2012, and I'm still here. So that's my little story on that. A call that sticks out with me is a suicide. I remember the lady, she called from a landline. You could tell she was standing away from the phone. And I was in training. I was sitting beside my trainer. And I answered the phone. She gives her name, her address, and her last words were, "I want you guys to find my body before my children get home." Next thing you know, we hear, it sounded like a cough. And I remember me and my trainer, we looked at each other like, what was that? Like, was that really what we think it is? So I'm like, ma'am, I'm trying to get her to keep talking, to say something. And she had completed a mission. And it was nothing. It messed with me for a while. But it was nothing I could have did different. Her mind was made up. And sometimes you have to understand there's nothing you can do to change the outcome. If it's bound to happen, it's going to happen. So that's all I can say.
Thank you.
No problem.
I had mentioned these connections and how some of these calls feel like they're meant for us. And I love that you had that connection still. You had that thought when you got in. You didn't want another person to have to go through what you did. A friend of mine a couple days ago who was in the class that I did, she was sharing her story and talking about how she didn't think that she was going to make it to 21. And all of these issues, all of these things that she was dealing with, and how she felt as a teenager growing up that she wasn't going to make it. She was trying to figure out her why. And she's working in dispatch, and she's struggling with a lot of stuff. And one day, a teenager calls in, suicidal, and basically said everything that she had dealt with. And she says in the story that she felt like she was talking to herself, and she knew how to be there for that person. And that person said, "Nobody cares." And she says, "I care." And that person said, "You're the first person to ever say that to me." And she said the call kind of messed her up, but it also felt good because that person who called was her at one time. And she just wished somebody would care. And now she was in this position to show that, to display it. And that was her why. That was her reason for doing what she does. And sometimes it's like that with some calls. Does anybody else have a story they'd like to share?
So I've only been doing this for about 2 years. So for me, the first part of training and everything was a blur. I don't even remember half of my training. I don't remember what I thought I was going to be doing. But this call came in. I can't remember the time. I can't even remember what I was doing. I know I was dispatching. And I think I was the second person to talk to this person. And she was like, I was just on the phone with my brother and his girlfriend on a video call. And she was holding the gun, or he was holding the gun, and it went off. I said, well, explain to me what's happening. What do you see? He said, she's laying there. I said, well, is she breathing? She said, well, she's breathing. But in my mind, I'm saying this must be agonal breathing. So I'm like, well, tell me exactly what happened. And she's like, she had the gun and she pulled the trigger and it just went off. They were arguing and she said, I'll do it. And the gun went off. So it was agonal breathing. She did not make it. The only reason I know that she did not make it, well, let me back up a bit. So I'm like, well, what's the address? I know what apartment complex they live in. I don't know the exact address. I'm on my way there now. I can meet officers or whatever. So she didn't know the apartment. She knew where they lived. She didn't know the apartment. She ended up having to be there to direct. A neighbor had called in and heard what they thought was gunshots too. So that kind of helped officers get to her. She was dead. The reason this stuck out to me is because maybe a couple weeks later, I'm looking at Facebook, and it was one of my family member's daughter's best friend. They had been through a long, she was only like 21, 22, if that. And domestic violence. He had a criminal past, which was crazy. Turned out he did pull the trigger, and the sister was trying to take up for him or what have you. And just impacted me knowing that someone I know is missing this person, is trying to plan a funeral, and I'm seeing it online, and I'm like, I heard this. I heard these people dealing with this situation, and he ran. He was found later. I saw some things on social media that led to him being caught. But it was just kind of traumatic, and seeing a young person or hearing young people go through this, something that really hit her hard because that's her best friend. And yeah, so that's my story. And it ended up personally impacting me. So that's going to stick with me probably for the rest of my life. Not probably, but for the rest of my life.
Thank you for sharing. The boss of a tree cutting company fell while cutting a tree. Their employee called 911 and did not know if he was breathing. After dispatching as an extreme fall and doing a check on the subject's breathing, we found he was not breathing. We started CPR, and I could hear their bones crushing with each pump. The male died, and I found out he fell from 40 feet. I can still hear the bones cracking. I am 911. The first domestic call I took, no one spoke, but I could hear everything in the background. I heard a female screaming for help as she was getting choked. I used Rapid SOS to plot her, and when the police got there, he ran out of the back door. She is okay because I got help there fast. I don't know if he was ever caught. I am 911. Mother's Day morning, 2002, about 3 a.m. I was working for the first time by myself. All was quiet. And then every phone line lit up. 6 admin lines and 4 911 lines. All I could say was, "Oh shit." Answered the first 911 line, and he was an older male saying somebody just shot up the house across the way. I asked if anyone was hurt or shot. He advised that it looked like a younger male was lying on the ground in front of the steps. I immediately contacted the road sergeant on the radio and advised them of the shooting, then immediately dispatched EMS and fire. Deputies were still 15 miles away and phones were still ringing. Fortunately, they were all for that one call. The young man did not make it. But the shooting was not for him. It was supposed to have been for his brother. To this day, I can still hear those phones ringing and the sound of the sergeant's 1999 Crown Vic's engine roaring over the radio as he was giving me updates on his locations. I am 911. It's a Friday night. I'm working an overtime shift due to short staffing. It's 6:05 p.m. I just logged in. I answer the phone, and a female is screaming. Her daughter had hung herself in the closet. She was not discovered for several hours. Her mother thought she was at a friend's house doing a school project. Her mom found her when she went to hang up her clean clothes in the closet. A few weeks later, I met the mom at the local fire department. She was trying to donate the home for a live burn training because she didn't want to live there anymore. I heard her screams, cries, rage. Then I saw her cries and empathy. I am 911. An 11-year-old girl called in because her father was drunk and trying to run her over with a truck. I could hear her running to a ditch and the truck getting louder in the background. She was safe that day, but I always think about her and if she had to go back. I am 911. I was a newly signed off call taker. I took a call from a mother screaming she had found her 14-year-old son hanging. He was screaming so much I was unable to give instructions to her. She shut his door, ran outside, and ran screaming to the neighbors who were not home. She refused to go back to him and cut him down. I felt helpless. I got off the call, left the room, and cried in a quiet corner. I am 911. I answered your call when you found your grandpa dead. I was grieving my own grandpa's death. I cried with you. I am 911. You answer a call for an outside building on fire. Then the caller tells you he's paraplegic and is on the ground and can't get out. You dispatch the fire department. The next thing he says is the fire is getting close. Then he says, "Damn, I'm on fire." He starts screaming for help. Then all he can do is holler. You can tell the fire is taking over his body and his voice. He keeps getting weaker and weaker. Then he is no longer responding. You already have a helicopter en route. He's flown to the burn center. He dies 2 days later, never becoming responsive after this incident. So you know, the last thing he remembers is pain and fear. Nothing you could do to take any of that away. I am 911. Mom called in. Sounded like she was in shock, so somewhat calm, but not eerily so. After starting medical interrogation, she reveals the baby isn't breathing. I walked both Mom and Dad through CPR until EMS, law enforcement, and fire had gotten there. The baby didn't make it. I questioned myself for weeks, asking whether or not I was where I wanted to be. It wasn't until I found out both parents were on drugs and smothered the baby after they'd passed out. The baby was a preemie and was also born addicted. He was the same age as my nephew was at the time, whose parents are also addicts. My heart was completely shattered, and I think of him every time I see my nephew. I am 911. You were 14, your sister just over a year. I remember your screams as you found her in the car seat on the back porch covered with a blanket. I tried to walk you through CPR. You had to pull the blanket out of her mouth and forcefully pull the straps apart on the car seat to get her out. You told me her chest was red and had indentions from where the straps were pulled tight. I felt the tears in my eyes fill as you continued to scream. I had small children at the time, and all I could see were their faces. I can still hear your screams and cries almost 10 years later. I am 911. I took a call about 6 a.m. It was a 20-year-old male who called and gave his name, address, and location. The caller then stated he couldn't handle it any longer and pulled the trigger and shot himself in the head. I was alone in the center at the time and grabbed my partner's headset, answered 911, who was his wife, screaming hysterically because she just found him. The sound of her screaming coming into both headsets was devastating. I could feel her pain, and every time I answer the phone now, I wonder if it is going to happen again. I am 911. I listened after a 22-year-old male shot himself in the face. I heard him gurgling. I listened to his gasps, and I heard his mother screaming for her baby. I gave life-saving instructions to his minor brother. I read his obituary a few days later. I think of his mother every day. I worry for his brother constantly. I started therapy over calls like this. There is no shame in talking. I am 911. I stayed on the phone with you as you walked back to the car where your friend was ODing, knowing you had to walk a few feet away so you wouldn't lose cell service. You thanked me for what I do and for helping him while we waited. It might be the only thank you I ever get, and I think about it every day. I am 911.
So I think calls with children always hit us really hard as dispatchers, especially young children. And we had a call one day come in, and I was working the police radio channel, and we had a call come in with a missing child endangered. It was a 5-year-old who was autistic. Their mother woke up. It was about 7 a.m. and we'd just been at work for only an hour and a half at this point, our shift. His mother woke up, her door was open, and the child was not there. She was running around her apartment complex looking for the child, and finally police get on scene, so our call taker hangs up. Police are searching the entire apartment complex as well, looking for this child. And the police officer goes and finds the child face down in the pool. And I just remember when that police officer keyed up, his voice was trembling and he said, "We found the baby. He's not alive." So we get out, going out. They try to see what they can do, but he wasn't there anymore. And that part was really hard. But the hardest part was, that really hit me, was 2 hours later. They tried to take the child to the hospital, but 2 hours later, the father arrived at the hospital with the mother. And it became a domestic dispute at the hospital because he was yelling at her and blaming her for the death of their child. And we're here for the living, and that's the hard part. They're the people we deal with. And to me, my heart was breaking for them because I can't imagine the pain and guilt she was feeling at that time. So that's why I shared.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
This was actually a call I took last week. This lady called and said that her husband had slid off the bed. They were both in their 80s, and she couldn't lift him up back up on the bed. And I heard him talking in the background, and I was just like, okay. Started asking her all the questions, and I think it was on a landline, and she kept putting the phone down and walking away to be with him. And like I said, he was talking in the background, and then all of a sudden she just started screaming, "His head is stuck. Like, his head is stuck on the bed." And I was like, what did you say? His head is stuck? Like, how? I was like, how does that even happen? But anyway, she had stepped away from the phone. I stayed on the line until they got there. I just remember feeling so helpless, trying to picture what was actually happening, and because you don't know, and that's the hardest part. So EMS got there, and he was DOA. And he was confirmed, and he died. And I remember I turned, and I was like, he died? So I was like, all he did was slide off the bed. Like, that happens all the time. They get there, they put him back on the bed, and he falls off in the morning. I just remember feeling so helpless. And I turned to her and I was like, is that my fault?
That's, like I said, a lot of the times we blame ourselves, right? Mm-hmm. And no, that's not your fault. None of these calls are anybody's fault. But because we're the ones there talking to them and taking this all in, we feel like it. Mm-hmm. Because it's our job to try to help and save as many lives as possible, and you're feeling helpless on that other side of the phone. I was there as well. Thank you, first and foremost, thank you for sharing your story. The last week before I finished my dispatch career, before I retired out, it felt like the dispatch gods were giving me every shit call. If dispatch was a gang, I was getting beat out. That's what it felt like. Every call, getting beat out. And I love that you laugh because you know what I mean. You know what I'm talking about. One of these calls, it started out as disorderly. The very last thing the person says to me is, I think he's suicidal too. Why didn't you tell me that to begin with? It changes everything, right? I had the phone number for the person. I tried calling them to see if I could get a hold of them. And as the phone is ringing, which is one of those stories that you saw up there about the car going into a tree. As the phone is ringing, things are going to hell because it's during shift change. I'm the only one who can take the next call that's coming in. So I hang up, answer the phone, and the guy says, I just saw a car go into a tree. And I just felt it. Sometimes you just feel it, right? And I asked him for the description. I don't see these cars around anymore. It's an old car, but it was a blue Toyota Tercel. And as he's saying it, I remember lipping it. And I said, is the person inside okay? And And luckily, this guy was checking on, because a lot of times, right, with our callers, they don't want to get involved. They just want to tell you what they see. They don't want to get involved, but this guy did. I'm thankful for that. When he goes, there's no way this guy survived. I'm looking at him right now. And I was like, then you need to just get away. We've got people. I yell over, my guy just went into a tree, the one that we were going to. They redirect and go there. But like you, I was also thinking, what if I would have changed my line of questioning? What if there was something else I could have done? It was enough, it bothered me enough that I was looking at our map that we had here and I started mapping out the distance. Because there couldn't be anything left to chance, right? Left to, like I had to know that I had done everything in my power to try to help that person. And finally I realized, and I talked to an officer and he's like, there's nothing you could have done, man. There's nothing you could have done. But for 30 minutes, I was listening to the call, seeing where I might have messed up, mapping things out, going into our mapping system. But there wasn't anything. But sometimes we blame ourselves. Thank you for sharing that. Does anybody else have a story?
I was on night shift one night. I had somebody off because I had to work channel. I'm shift supervisor on my shift, and so I had to work a channel. Well, it's probably going at 4 o'clock in the morning. I take a call from this girl, and she said that, she was just with this guy. He was trying to force his cell phone and all that stuff, I said, okay. He's got cocaine in the back of the car and he's got an AR in the back seat, I said, all right, so we can dispatch units out there, and we don't work for the sheriff, but, we over the years, I've been there 18 years, we've become close with the deputies and stuff. We don't work, directly for the sheriff, and the whole time I had her on the phone, I had a feeling like, I don't know, something about this call, And so they get out there and start looking for the suspect vehicle. Essentially 28 for you. So I ran to 28. We'll come back to the suspect's vehicle. We found out, shots fired, subject's down. I said, damn. I said, so far in 18 years, I said, there's two things I never want to hear. Officer down and shots fired. And, of course, they did CPR with the guy, he was dead. But the whole time I played that call back, I said, was there anything different we could have done? I told my folks, I still had the girl on the phone, I said, y'all don't tell them nothing else, y'all let he's got the AR in the back seat of that car. And sure enough, he got out with it, pointed out, they shot him. But, especially my brother-in-law, being a deputy as well, it's just like, I hope I never hear those words, officer down or shots fired. And I was like, damn, after 18 years, it happened. Luckily, none of the deputies were hurt, but just I went to bed for a while. I just, that call kept playing back in my head, And I was like, because I EPD'd it, went through the protocol and all that, I was like, y'all couldn't have done anything different. You can't help the outcome of what he did,
Yeah.
Play stupid games, you win stupid prizes, and that's what he did, And I guess after 18 years, I get kind of salty on certain things, but I was like, well, it happened. There's one thing we could do about it, But we kind of second guessed ourselves for a little while, But just, hopefully it won't happen again,
Right.
in the next 10 years before I retire or whatever. But, it's always that possibility.
I love that when you were saying this, that you had mentioned, you've gotten kind of salty about a little bit of things, right? But even with that, I love that you had and felt that moment that you wanted to share as well. So thank you.
Yeah, because the deputies involved in, like I said, we've been knowing them for years, they've been there a long time, survived, so you kind of, get a personal relationship with them, even though you don't work directly with them,
Exactly.
You don't want none of those guys get hurt, I'm a stickler. I tell my folks, I said, look, that alarm goes off, check these guys. I don't care if they're on a cat stuck in a tree call. You go from sugar to shit quick.
Exactly.
So, check these guys' status when they're out there.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I had just come to day shift as a supervisor, and it was during the height of COVID. I've been on night shift for 16 and a half years. And come to day shift, and during the height of COVID, we were fortunate enough that we could work at a backup center. My son was exposed to COVID. He was a paramedic with the county. And get to work, 6 o'clock in the morning, sign in on my computer. Talked to Kelly and was like, I got the phones from here. 2 seconds after I told her that, my baby ain't breathing. There's about 2 inches of snow on the ground. Like, shit. This is gonna suck. Get all the information. It's about 6 weeks old. Ma'am, this is what I need you to do. She keeps going. CPR the whole time. Daddy's in the background. She's fucking gone. I told you she's fucking gone. I said, ma'am, I said, what I need you to do, get him away from it. I need you to listen to me only. She said, okay. What would have normally been a 5-minute response for EMS turned out to be 27 and a half minutes for EMS to get there due to snow conditions on the ground. Normally it wouldn't bother me because I've been through so many. The only thing I could think about was my son in 2002. I was working at the fire department. We get a call. Code blue. My address comes up. It was my son. Luckily, when we get there, we're doing CPR. My ex-wife, she was doing CPR on him. He'd been down for 10 minutes. Only thing I could think about was, that's my child and I have to help save this child. My son survived, this one didn't. And every time I get a pediatric call now, it scares the hell out of me. I've been doing it for 18 years. As soon as I got off the phone, everybody that's on my shift that's sitting at this table sent me a message. You need to take a break. Do you need to go home? Within 3 minutes of ending the call, my operations manager called and says, go home. I said, no, because I ain't gonna do nothing but sit there and think about it all day. I need to stay right here. I've always been big and bad and laughed and joked. Don't hold this shit in if you got it. Don't blame anybody, especially yourself, for doing it. You got a job to do, and do it well, because you never know who's on the other end of that line that needs your help. My son is 23 years old now, and he's my best friend. Couldn't have done it without him.
Thank you, sir. I'm gonna bring it in if it's okay.
You good?
I have one. It's not really per se a story. Sorry.
No, you're good. You're good.
It's been several years ago. Most of the people on my shift are in here today. But in that one day, I took 2 pediatric drownings and an infant code in 12 hours. Daddy rolled over on baby during the middle of the night. When Mama got up, baby was obviously already gone. But then, yeah, before shift was up, I took 2 pediatric drownings. I know one didn't make it, and for some reason I want to say the other one did, but it was touch and go. But yeah, that's hard in 1 12-hour.
Right, yeah.
for you know, pediatrics like that. They're tough, for sure.
Thank you.
Realize that, you know, mental fatigue we go through. You know, I get home from work for 12 hours shift, you know, like, well, what's wrong with you? You know, you ain't done them sitting all day and answering the phone. I feel my blood pressure going up. She says that. It's that mental fatigue that, you know, people don't know about. Stuff, you know, like she said, the mothers you hear hollering in your ear, but, you know, a baby's drowned or whatever. You know, it's that part of the job people don't realize. They think we're just sitting there answering the phone, talking on the radio. And I tell people, look, you need to come up here and see it and see exactly what we do. You know, I've been in the fire department 28 years. These guys in the field don't realize. You know, you need to come up here and see it and see exactly what we do. I think a lot of, you know, earlier we were talking about, you know, staffing and stuff like that. I think of a lot of, you know, commissioners, and I know I think there's a commissioner in here was earlier anyway. I think if they would come in and see it and see exactly what we do on a daily basis, I think they would get a better perspective looking at these folks. You know, they need better. They need to be treated better. Because, you know, not just my county, but I know everybody's struggling. And you know, the call volumes are going up, they're not going down.
Right.
I mean, doing more or less, I know everybody is. You know.
That's why stuff like this is so important as well, and to be able to share our story so that people can hear this. The reason this is called Imagine Listening is because I want those folks to do just that. I want them to imagine listening. Like you spoke, all of you who have spoken, so that they know, what is this like? How many times have you had officers come in and they're there for a few minutes, they're like, I have no idea how you can do this.
Oh, yeah, I tell us all the time, they come in.
So, I believe it was last summer. Actually, me and Patrick here, we were working pod together. I was working EMS, he was working fire. And it was a hot summer afternoon, and I was maybe around 3 or 4 o'clock. I picked the call up, man's driving. They rolled their truck on, I don't know what highway it was, had a trailer attached to it. He was pinned. She was, I think, entrapped. So I'm getting information from him. I'm asking, you know, the questions. Come to find out, they hit power lines. Power lines are live on top of the car. He's not breathing. So I'm giving her CPR instructions. Well, she can only get one hand to him. So she's doing CPR with one hand. And so we get everybody on the way. We have like a couple of fire departments there. They can't get to him until a power company gets there and cuts that power. And we got live wires on top of it. And it laid right on top of the trailer and the cab all the way across. So they couldn't get out. And Duke Energy got there and they cut the power. And by the time I stay on the phone, about 45 minutes? About 45 minutes to an hour, yeah. And I stay on the phone doing CPR, talking with her. And about the end of it, he came back. And he was talking. By the end of the conversation, I could hear him talking to her. They cut the power, got them both out, and transported. So I wanted to tell that because I've heard a lot of sad stories, and you know, I've been there. I've had a lot of sad stories, but you know, there are some good days, and that was one day that I won't never forget because, you know, I was. You know, we help each other out, you know, with channels and stuff. And I remember Patrick telling me, you know, I got everything. You just stay on the phone. So, and that's what happened that day. And, you know, I really appreciate everything that worked out that day.
Thank you. That's good. And yes, like I said in the beginning, if you have a save, please share as well. These are part of these powerful and important stories. These are ones the commissioners and a lot of other people will be able to learn as well. Here's the other thing too, what's important about coming together and recognizing each other is because we've been fighting for years for reclassification, right? The point of that, right off the bat, It's not for the benefits and everything. That comes eventually. Simply what the 911 Saves Act is going to do is reclassify you federally to be in that protective class. It's for recognition, finally, to be in that class. However, if we can't recognize each other, how are we going to expect for the government to recognize us? That is why this shit is important. That is why I continue to share these stories and put it out there so that people know what it is that you go through. But we got to recognize each other. Thank you, all of you, for sharing.
Kind of got related to what he said about the PED code. One day working, so like he said, it seemed like every time I answered your phone, it was something horrific. And I'm a volunteer fireman outside of 911. So it happened I get to work in the same county I volunteer and answer the phone, recognize the address, so not far from where I live. He said, my son's not breathing, like he said. That's a different world when you answer the phone and it's like, a child, even, it don't matter how old you are, but just, a child, Pacific. And he kept saying, he's gone, he's gone, he's gone. And he said, it's wrapped around his neck. I said, sir, what do you mean it's wrapped around his neck? He said, I don't know what happened. I woke up this morning and he got out of his bed and he got hung up in a space heater cord and it strangled him to death. We started CPR and the emotions from the guy, when we gave CPR, he was crying and he was counting with me. And like you said, you hearing, them struggling just as much, I was getting teared up. And to know that the volunteer department that responded with EMS is the same department I'm with, the quick response from them, and you could just hear, and I stayed on the line, just hearing everybody how hard they were working, and it was getting emotional. But that child did not make it, but it was just a thought, like you said, you don't ever know who's on the other end. I knew the family, I knew the child, I knew the responders, and it's just one of the things you don't know what's going to happen when you answer the phone.
Thank you.
So going off with what he said about children and how hard it hits us, I was a month into my 911 career, and I was working night shift. It was about, 11 o'clock? 11, 12 o'clock at night, and we got a call for a structure fire. And I don't remember if they said at the time that there was 3 children inside or if they had even mentioned the kids, but EMS and the fire department got on scene. 2 children had got out and there was still a little boy left. His stepdad was so drunk trying to cook supper at 12 o'clock at night that he caught the whole house on fire. And there's a video on Facebook, I still remember to this day, watching it after all this happened, and this little girl's going, go get my brother, go get my brother. And he said, I'm not going back in that damn house. And that little boy got scared trying to come out. He ran back to his bed and crawled underneath the sheets, and he died. And after that day, I was like, I'm gonna quit. Like, this is not for me, but I've stuck to it, and it's been a venture ever since.
Thank you. I'm glad that you're here as well. Thank you.
So I took a call a few weeks ago. It was a preteen boy. He called and he was just absolutely losing his mind, just freaking out on me. I was trying to figure out, I said, what is going on? He said he had shot himself. And so I was sitting there trying to get the address, trying to get his phone number, trying to figure out what had happened. And he had told me that he had shot himself in his leg. So I was trying to figure out, okay, where in your leg? Is it your top leg, your bottom leg? Like, what's going on? Where's the weapon? And he's home by himself. His parents, I think, were at work. I was trying to get him to calm down enough for me to get EMS there, to get the sheriff's office there, to get somebody on the scene to help him. And we ended up having to, towards the end of the call, he said he can't feel his legs. He can't feel anything. He's starting to freak out on me. I was like, listen, buddy. I said, let's just talk about something else here. I've got help coming to you. Do you have any siblings? What grade are you in? Where do you go to school? Trying to help him calm down. And eventually the EMS got there and they got sheriff's office there. They secured the weapon. He went to the hospital, but just hearing that panic in his voice when he's home by himself and he had shot himself, I'll never forget it. Like, he just, the way he was carrying on, it was hard to listen to.
Thank you. So this is a good thing. And I want to thank all of you for being here, as I've said, in support of each other and sharing these stories. A round of applause for everyone who shared a story, please.
And welcome back. And again, a big shout out to everyone who was there, and to the 911 board for bringing me in to go to the different counties and teach my class, but especially during the Imagine Listening session. You may or may not know this, but for Imagine Listening, it was always exclusive to basically to conferences and such, because that's where I was going. That's where I was traveling. There were so many people, whether it was a state one or a national one. But a lot of folks were saying, I might not ever get a chance to go to a conference. So I've done it a couple times virtually, and which it was really, really good as well. Still very powerful. A lot of folks sharing stories. And but the whole experience, being out there with everyone in there, there was about, 45, 50 people or so in that room. And I always enjoy talking about what it is that we're going to do, specifically because you can see on everyone's faces that they had no idea what they were signing up for, especially the Imagine Listening part. And as you heard, there was a gentleman in there who said, not to hold this stuff in. And I agree. Don't hold this stuff in. I did it for years. And don't think that you're weak either for reaching out for help, okay? Or even sharing a story or anything like that. There's more courage and power facing your own demons, so to speak, and those calls that you've taken when you're ready, okay? Let me get that straight and make that clear. When you are ready to share. And then you do so, and it does become therapeutic. As I've been saying for such a long time now, one voice can make a difference. One voice can change the world. And for those who are watching right now, just as my shirt says, one voice, your voice, can change the world. And even if you don't think that your voice can change the world, just remember that your voice can change your caller's world, or those of different disciplines of public safety out in the field. You can change their world, or those around you, especially those that work with you. And that is how much power you have. So remember that, and hold your head up high, because you do a job as the most vital piece of public safety that not many people can do. And if you haven't heard it lately, I'll say it again. Thank you for everything that you do. So if you have any comments, questions, or you ever want to be a guest on the show, and this is whether you are brand new to dispatch, seasoned dispatch, or retired, I would love to share your story. I've been doing this for over a decade now. It's my passion. And I just thank you for the trust in me to share your stories. I don't take it lightly, and it's just probably the greatest honor. So thank you, all of you, for everything. And again, if you have any comments, questions, you can email us, and that's going to be wttpodcast@gmail.com. Once again, that is wttpodcast@gmail.com. You can follow us on social media. You can be a supporter of the podcast as well, whether it be on Circle, Facebook, or Patreon. And you can simply go to the link that's in the bottom left-hand corner. But for those who are listening right now, it's links.co/WTT podcast. And once again, that is links.co/WTT podcast. And you'll find everything there. My email, all of my social media, where to follow, where to hear the latest episode, where to order volume 2 of Imagine Listening. Your worst days are every day. And also, coming up soon, you'll be able to pre-order my version of Volume 1 of Imagine Listening, and I cannot wait for all of you to see it. So make sure to look out for that. Also, Dare to Be Great 6 is going on. I have a bunch of announcements that have gone out there, so look out for that. And you can find merch, podcast merch, dispatch merch, everything on that as well. Once again, it's linkswithtwoeyes.co/WTT podcast. You'll find everything there. This live broadcast has been sponsored by InDigital, a leader Next Gen Core Services. Shout out to subscribers of the podcast and all of you watching, listening, supporting, and sharing. And you can see this on Facebook, YouTube, X, as well as LinkedIn Live. And you can listen 24/7 on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, your favorite podcasting app, and withinthetrenches.net. Have a good one, everyone. And we will see you all in the next one.